The clashes at universities across the country. Take a look at the scene right now. Protesters on campus there in North Carolina. And then overnight, protesters here in New York.
Zionist Jews are anti-Semitic. Have you listened to any Zionist, like Jewish, Christian, doesn't matter? Yes, saying Zionism is inherently anti-Semitic. Okay? Saying that Israel has to exist as a Jewish ethno-state and it actually corresponds to the fucking interests of all Jews around the world is unironically what the Nazis say about Jews, okay? And it's also what Zionists say about Jews. Zionist Christians, Christo-fascists, and Zionist Jews alike absolutely are unimaginably anti-Semitic to anti-Zionist Jews.
At Columbia barricaded themselves inside the school, and now the university is taking more action. Stephanie Ramos is there on the scene for us. Good morning to you, Stephanie.
Robin, good morning. Despite warnings of suspension and expulsion for students in University's Hamilton Hall, and then storming the building. Video capturing students slamming desks, breaking windows, and barricading themselves inside. Just after 12:30 this morning, dozens of students left the encampment and entered the hall. Students defiant, refusing to dismantle their encampment.
You need to stop bombing. You need to stop indiscriminate killing, massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. That's how you end the war.
At least one person arrested Monday outside Columbia's gates, seen here being taken into custody.
Oh my God.
And overnight at Virginia Commonwealth University, a large crowd of pro-Palestinian protesters clashing with police in riot gear. This video showing police spraying what appears to be pepper spray at protesters. The university telling ABC News multiple arrests were made and claiming that many individuals involved were not students. This as similar demonstrations and clashes now playing out at more than 60
I don't think comparing Zionism and ISIS is an apt comparison because essentially zero Muslims support ISIS and most Jews above 30 consider it to be an important part of their Jewish identity. And the better analogy is Islam and Saudi nationalists saying this as an anti-Zionist Jew. I understand what you're saying, except the outcome is ISIS-style behavior. I know that from a messaging perspective, I shut the conversation off for anyone over the age of 35, okay? But the reality is that just because there is a shit ton more support and a lot more defense of that kind of behavior doesn't mean that, like, it is not a correct analogy. It is an apt comparison. It's just not one that I can make if I want to get anyone over the age of 35 on my side. I can't, and I recognize that.
College campuses across the U.S. At the University of Texas at Austin, dozens arrested as protesters and police in riot gear clashed. At the University of Florida, 9 protesters arrested. The school saying the University of Florida is not a daycare and we do not treat protesters like children. They knew the rules. They broke the rules. Jewish students on both sides of the issue, some who are pro-Israel, say they've been harassed.
It's not easy to stand here alone when the whole university is practically against us.
At USC, administrators canceling their main commencement ceremony due to protests. Many of the soon-to-be graduates missed their high school graduation due to the pandemic.
My high school just had a drive-through graduation. I personally was really looking forward to having this main ceremony and traditional graduation for my whole life.
Back here at Columbia University, officials have not commented on the actions of those students that stormed that building overnight. As for the talks between student negotiators and university officials, those are at a standstill. But guys, already so many students here have been suspended.
All right, Stephanie, our thanks to you. We're going to bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. So much at play here. And one concern is the rights, the First Amendment rights of the students. How does free speech play into all this? How does it factor in?
So the First Amendment is not absolute, right? Think about libel laws, right?
Bro, these are never arguments that they make about Nazis, okay? Like actual anti-Semitic people. Only when it's about something that the American government has decided is good do we start launching these like, well, you know, cops do have to fucking crack some skulls every now and then. It's such a fucking hilarious moment. And this never would have happened. This is something that pro-Palestinian advocates have known for decades. This is something that I have talked about for decades, about like the real anti-free speech, the real actual state suppression of speech only happens to pro-Palestinian protesters, only happens to like a movement like BDS and nothing else. Fascists will always be protected by the government, and they are. Free speech extends only to fascists and only to right-wing sentiment, okay? The only reason why we're having this conversation right now in this regard is because there is broad momentum on the Palestinian side, especially by those under the age of 35. That's what I mean when I say I'm very hopeful about this moment. I've never seen so much awfulness and so much hope at the same exact time. Bro, your hypocrisy is funny. Explain what you mean by that, please. I would love to hear what you mean by that, Q Patriot 12. Because when fascists roam around campuses or do demonstrations, their goal is clear. It is the ethnic cleansing of minority populations. They very openly state that, including Jewish people as well, like actual fascists. Okay? So that limitation doesn't extend to those guys at all. The limitation only extends when you say, hey, our tax dollars and our tuition shouldn't go to funding an apartheid regime, to funding a genocide. So go ahead. Explain to me how I'm hypocritical. I would love to hear from Q Patriot 12, Mr. QAnon himself in the building.
Someone can say something about someone else and they can get sued over it. And they can't say, well, it's my First Amendment right to say it. There are restrictions that are allowed within the First Amendment. To have a
This is not one of them, by the way. Like, this definitionally is a violation of free speech. State suppression of speech. Speech does have limitations. Okay? You can't do libel. You can't slander people. That's true. Okay? And you also can't yell fire in a fucking theater or whatever, the classic example. So obviously there are restrictions on what you can and can't say. However, having said that, you absolutely can engage in civil disobedience against unjustifiable hierarchies. You can absolutely, and you must absolutely engage in civil disobedience and protest and take advantage of the First Amendment in the exact same way that these students are doing. State restriction and state suppression upon these demonstrations is a direct violation of First Amendment rules. Anyone who fucking champions the police or the National Guard in this circumstance is unironically the only people that are anti-free speech.
Parade in a city, you still have to get a permit. You can't just say we're allowed to do it. And the key here is that the universities and the authorities would say, we're not targeting what they're saying. It's not because of what flag they're holding up. It's because of the actions that they're taking. It's that they're shutting down buildings. They're trespassing on private property. And
that's bullshit. Those are all bullshit reasons to actually suppress free speech. That's fucking bullshit.
Result, that's not protected by the First Amendment.
Right, the students who are not protesting have rights as well to live their lives, to study, to not be disrupted.
Correct, and most importantly, the university has the authority to determine what they do and they don't want on their campus.
Is there a difference between public and private universities?
There is. Look, you have much...
Bro, you can make the same argument against the civil rights movement. Yes, and they did. The very same people that represent the very same interests, rather, in the 60s, said the exact same things against the student demonstrations, both during the civil rights movement and also during the anti-war Vietnam protests. They said the same shit. This is the role of the media. The media is supposed to not actually be contentious to positions of power, but to basically fucking sedate the masses and tell them that, like, no, you do feel good when police are beating the shit out of student protesters for the crime of engaging in civil disobedience against the genocidal state that we are funding and facilitating and offering fucking political cover for. They did this in the 80s during the apartheid protests.